businesses, and ideas. God heard my dreams way back then, and this old tire warehouse was confirmation for me that He'd had a plan all along. In 2015, just to put all of the puzzle pieces in place, we brought my father on to help with operations. Dad had always hoped I would take over his Firestone store. My decision to open Magnolia in 2003 had been hard for him, in fact, because it put an end to his dream of passing his business down to his daughter. But God has a funny way of bringing things back the way only He can do. My dad went from the back-breaking rubber tire industry to florals and delicate home decor and never skipped a beat. Chip and I stood back amazed at the number of people who were coming to Waco to visit our little shop. It soon became obvious that we'd need to move the brick-and-mortar Magnolia Market to a bigger location to accommodate the crowds. Anyone driving in or around Waco had probably noticed the pair of big, rusty white silos just to the west of Interstate 35. They towered over just about every structure in town. Located down by the railroad tracks, they were once a part of a booming agricultural business. But as long as I'd been aware of them, they had been empty and abandoned. I had often wondered why the property had stood vacant for so long. Surely some big hotel or convention center or something would have loved that location, right in the center of everything, close to Baylor, visible from the highway. My children actually went to school right across the street from those old giant silos. The small building in front, which was the former office for the operation, had once been a floral shop where Chip would buy me flowers. I loved this building and had taken note years earlier that it had amazing potential. And now that I saw it nearly every day, walking my kids up the school with those silos towering over us, I found myself even more interested. One day, I dropped the kids off at school, and as I drove past the silos, I felt like I should turn around and look back at the property. My heart was drawn to them the same way it had been stirred when Chip and I drove through the New England coastline on our honeymoon and admired similar old structures. My first thought that day was, how convenient to be right next to the kids' school. I was craving more time with my kids now that they were all in school, and anything to make the commute quicker would ensure more time with my children. I even daydreamed about watching them on the playground from my office. All of a sudden, a business plan came together in my mind as I sat in my car staring at the property. I envisioned retail space in the grain barn, movie night in the adjacent field, food trucks parked nearby, and maybe a bakery. My mind just flooded with a vision of turning that abandoned cotton oil mill into Magnolia's new headquarters and retail space, and creating an attraction that could become a whole new center of activity for Waco itself. The history of this property is what inspired me. I saw this vision of life returning to this once thriving but now abandoned space. I imagined family and friends coming here and taking a step back in time, putting away their phones and enjoying the sight. Then I called Chip and I told him I wanted to buy it. "Babe, are you serious? What in the world are we going to do with all that?" he said. I think after all the problems we'd endured because of the downturn in the economy and the season of turmoil we'd been through, Chip had grown a little more risk-averse, a little more cautious. Once again, it almost felt like we were switching roles a bit because I was all in. I just felt this is what was meant to be. Of course, the property wasn't even for sale as far as we knew. We didn't know who the owners were at that point or why the property had remained vacant all those years, but somehow I just knew it would happen. It didn't take long for Chip to catch the vision. He tracked down the owner of the property and gave him a call. The owner explained he wasn't interested in selling and that the mill had been his father's business until he passed away in the 90s. He said everyone interested in purchasing the property wanted to tear down the silos, and he did not want that to happen. Chip assured him that the silos were the very things that had drawn us to the property, that instead of removing them, we wanted to highlight them in the downtown area. I think a lot of people liked seeing them there, whether they thought about it consciously or not. So when we came along and said we wanted to preserve the silos as a landmark they are and turn this property into something that could serve as a vibrant centerpiece for the whole community, he was interested. Chip was still skeptical, though. He said, "Joe, this is a big project, and I don't want to get into the same place we were in with the villas." "Chip, I just feel like this is right. This is our next step."
Part of me was wondering if maybe we could make some money by tearing down the giant silos and selling them for scrap metal. I kept joking with Joe and teasing about it. But she put together a drawing of the whole space and how she envisioned it all coming together. And once I took a look at that, once I truly saw her vision for this retail center and the new headquarters for the company, I was 100% on board. This place was JoJo, no doubt about it. I just kept thinking back about all those years ago on our honeymoon, how she'd have me pull over anytime we'd see a silo or an abandoned grain barn. It just made sense, like this was all part of the plan.
I let Chip handle all the negotiations because that's always been his thing. We were able to make a deal, and once again, just as with the shop on Bosque, just as with the farm we now call home, the seemingly impossible and out of reach became real. In fact, it seemed very meant to be. Thousands of people showed up when we opened Magnolia Market at the Silos in October of 2015, and they haven't stopped coming ever since. The store has 16,000 square feet of floor space, and it's constantly filled with people, inside and out. This rusty old place that some people considered an eyesore is now a viable part of our downtown district. It's also providing jobs to dozens upon dozens of new and longtime Magnolia employees. Talk about coming full circle. If I ever needed proof that I should trust God with my dreams, this was certainly it. He turned my little dream, my mustard seed of faith, into all this. Not even a decade after I made that difficult decision to close my shop to stay home with my babies, God delivered on the promise of making my dreams come true in ways that were bigger than I ever imagined. The best part of all this growth is that we've been able to channel it right back into the town we love. We're both proud of the work our friends and fellow business owners do, the local craftsmen and craftswomen who've dedicated their time and energy to making the beautiful items we showcase, from jewelry to furniture to handmade signs and pottery. Who knows, maybe someday soon we'll find a way to bring Magnolia Market to other cities. How cool would it be to feature local artists and craftsmen and to bring this wonderful thing that's happened in our hometown to hometowns all over America? Look at what Chip unleashed by encouraging me to open my little shop way back in 2003. Look at what all that turned into. I'm so grateful for that, and I'm not sure if any of these big plans will ever happen, but I like to dream about them. And as I've learned, when I speak my dreams out loud to Chip, and to God, those dreams always have a way of becoming attainable. Life changes quickly. Overnight, your whole world can change. Chip and I have already experienced that time and time again, and in this season we're in now, which is by far the busiest season of our lives, the changes that have happened are things no one can prepare for. I'm an introvert by nature, yet now everywhere I go, people seem to know me and come up to me and want to talk to me, and it's beautiful. I'm so grateful. And Chip just loves it. I think he'd like to be president of the United States someday, so he's out there shaking everybody's hand and kissing babies and waving to everybody. We've simply had to adjust to a new way of living, that's all. Chip and I both work hard. We continue to make mistakes, and these days we work even harder to learn from them and get better. If I had planned my life, it never would have ended up like this. So maybe it's kind of fun not to plan. Maybe it's more fun just to see where life takes you. After all, we're living proof that sometimes even the messiest stuff and the biggest mistakes can take you someplace wonderful.
Speaking of which, we finally sold that old houseboat. We never did get it in the water. That thing just sat there until the summer of 2015 when we finally found a buyer who was willing to devote the time and energy it would take to bring that boat back to life.
I was mad at Chip when he bought that houseboat. I think I had every right to be mad. But the point is that it turned out okay. It turned out better than okay. That stupid houseboat was the catalyst that got us to where we are now. And no, the dream isn't about fame and fortune. For me, the dream is that I get to wake up every morning and do what I love with the ones I love. When Chip is out in the field herding the goats or working the cows, he gets that same feeling. Because back when he was little, he said to himself, one day, I want to do what my granddad does. Being on a farm is something we both dreamed about, and in the hustle and bustle of our busy life, when I come back here to this place I love, it always takes me back to the basics. That's why I go into the garden and work with my hands. That's why I think it's important that Chip works with those animals. There's something about doing things the way our ancestors used to do them that kind of puts your heart back into the rhythm of this thing called life. It's why I think cooking for my family is important. It's why I love making things with my hands, designing with my hands, and gardening with my hands. I think it's important to reiterate here that I didn't start out wanting to be a gardener or a designer for that matter. It was all trial and error and figuring things out. And sometimes you've got to try something outside of your comfort zone to figure out what it is you truly love.
Well, you can definitely say that about you and me right from the start. You were never looking for the loud guy, and I certainly wasn't looking for the quiet girl.
Now I can look back and go, if I would have ended up with that quiet guy or that stable guy or that safe guy, I would have never been able to pursue any of these dreams because no one would have pushed me to these new places I discovered in myself. Those other types of guys might have allowed me to stay in that safe place.
They wouldn't have drawn you out. That's interesting. You know, if I would have ended up with some cheerleader type who was always the life of the party, I don't think I would have found my way either. You know, I needed you for that.
Nowadays, when I think about the name Magnolia, I think about it in terms that refer to much more than the blossoming of our business. I think about the buds on the tree and how they really are just the tightest buds. They look like rocks almost. I feel like when Chip and I met, that tight little bud was me. I was risk-averse, and in some ways, I don't think I saw the beauty or the potential in myself. Then I wound up with Chip Gaines, and...
And you bloomed.
I did. If I hadn't married Chip, I might not ever have bloomed.
I can't imagine what my life would look like if we hadn't have traveled this road. We celebrated our 12th anniversary recently, and my dad said something that I thought was just beautiful. He said, Chip, I always thought when we were out there on the baseball field hitting those grounders that I was training you to be the next greatest baseball player. But now, looking back, seeing the person you become, I was really training you to be the next greatest dad.
We've both spent a lot of time attempting to figure out what it is we love so much about life on the farm, and also why so many other people who watch our show seem to be drawn to it too. And what it comes down to is this. A farm is what inspired the both of us from the very beginning. It's what inspired Chip as a young kid. It's what inspired me as a young girl in my daydreaming. And now we're living our dream. We found our way to this place we love through all sorts of twists and turns and bumps and forks in the road. But we're here. It isn't as if we're trying to push our lifestyle on anyone. If we're trying to push anything, it's the hope that there's contentment in the journey. Whether you're in an 800-square-foot home or living in a dream house on a lake, contentment is found on the way to the farm, not on the farm itself. We both hope with all of our hearts that the people who read this book and who watch our show and come to see what we're working on in Waco will take a chance to go after their dreams too. Because the key to everything Chip and I have learned in our life together so far seems to be pretty simple. Go and find what it is that inspires you. Go and find what it is that you love, and go do that until it hurts. Don't quit and don't give up. The reward is just around the corner. And in times of doubt or times of joy, listen for that still, small voice. Know that God has been there from the beginning, and He will be there until the end.